Welcome to episode 26 of Absolutely Fabulous. Today our topics are side by side. Initially dubbed safer than a quad bikes, they are now the leading cause of killing farmers. And topic 2, hobby farmers debate. Gillian takes the against, Katja takes the affirmative. The greatest hobby farmer showdown.
Hi, welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are Absolutely Fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode. But before we jump into those, let's have some chit chat. Gillian, what's been happening on farm and station this week?
We've had a bit of rain, which was good. It's trying to rain again at the moment, actually. So fingers crossed the road doesn't get too wet so I can get out on Wednesday so I can drive to Dubbo for the conference.
Woohoo!
Been planning my trip. It's going to take me a while because I could do it in one day, but it's like a 12-hour drive. So we're trying to break it up a little bit to make it a bit more manageable so I'm not a walking zombie the whole time I'm there. But yeah, other than that, things have been pretty quiet, actually. We've just been, because it's rained, we don't have that much stuff to be chasing anymore, and not a lot's been happening. So what's been happening at your place, Katja? Any rain at your place?
Rain at our place. So we had a beautiful 25 mil, nice light rain, and it started right after we finished sowing our oats. So that was perfect. We've already got some great germination, which was fantastic to see, because usually when we grade our oats, I'll do a germination test, and that has worked for the last few years, but this year the bag got shaken a few times and they failed to germinate. I wonder why. But with each child would come along and pick up the bag of oats off the kitchen bench and give it a good shake and say, "Hey, Mum, what's this?" And well, of course, they didn't germinate after being shaken 3 or 4 times. So that was good. Carving's going well, and we're just getting prepared for, I'm getting prepared for the conference. The farm's getting prepared for the Royal Easter Show, which is coming up soon. We're taking a big team, as we always do. So that will be lots of fun. That'll be our next little mission after the conference, but getting all the knickknacks ready for that. The speakers bags and parcels that I ordered for all the speakers and the workshop hosts arrived today. All the gift bags have been packed with a majority of the gear. I'm going to do a run into town on Wednesday to hopefully pick up the last of everything from the post office. I might even have to do a last minute run on Friday. We will see.
Would you like to hear about where the Ag Fab gifts are at for the conference bags? Because this has turned into a bit of a... So this is what happened. I ordered the little gifts. Half of it's turned up. The other half, the really cool, exciting half, not the boring like writing part, is the really cool thing that people get to take home. I ordered that and I sent it on the mail plane thinking that it will be more reliable and it will actually turn up directly here to the station, because as you might know, my mail goes missing quite frequently because they can't seem to figure out where I live. But we haven't had a mail plane for 2 weeks, and it was due to come again today, but it got cancelled again because it was raining in Alice Springs. So I had to get a friend in Alice Springs to go to the mail plane hangar, pick up the post, and fingers crossed they've put it on the bus so it will come down to Marla so I can pick it up on Wednesday morning on my way down south. Otherwise, there's going to be a mad trip to Adelaide to do something, or Port Pirie to find something to go with the little writing parts to actually make a cool thing to go in the gift bag. So don't get your hopes up for a really cool Ag Fabs gift. It might be stickers from Kmart yet.
So if anyone else is wondering why it takes 6 weeks to get from, either my place to Gillian's place or Gillian's place to my place with mail, that's why, because there's a fair few steps between the station and the farm here.
And that's when they can actually figure out to deliver it to Marla and not send it to Roxby Downs, which is, I don't know, 600 k's away and not even remotely close to where I live. But anyway, usually it's only electronic devices go missing in the post, so I'm pretty sure there's something suspicious happening there.
That does sound slightly suspicious.
Right, we better get into it.
We'd better get into it. Right, topic 1. Despite having safety features such as a roll bar and seatbelts and others, let me start that again. Gillian and I have switched from recording to the morning to recording at night. We're going to give it our best shot, but we've both been up, we've both been working hard, so we might have a few slip-ups and I'll have to be working on my editing skills a little bit more now that we've switched to night times. Despite having safety features such as seatbelts and a rollover protection cage, the working vehicle was involved in 14 deaths on Australian farms last year. Once dubbed safer than a quad bike, are side-by-sides, also known as ATVs, heading towards being the most dangerous vehicle on farms?
That is a really good question, because I think they probably are. And this is where our family's probably a little bit different to a lot of other families. We don't have four-wheel drives or side-by-sides. Our kids learn to ride two-wheel motorbikes because when they're young and inexperienced, they can't go fast enough to really seriously damage themselves, especially when the peewees, because you can wind the throttle back so they can't really build up any speed. If they do happen to come off and the bike lands on top of them, it's not heavy enough to trap them and kill them, which is what happens with side-by-sides and four-wheelers. And it's those two things where a lot of people say, oh, no, I'm going to get my kid a four-wheeler because it's much, much safer. They go really fast, they're really heavy, and kids and adults too, because I've seen it myself, they get overconfident and they will tip it over. And if you're by yourself and your leg is trapped underneath something that weighs, I don't know, how much do they weigh? 400 kilos maybe? I've never tried to pick one up.
They're near impossible to pick up.
Yeah, and also, if you're trapped underneath it and it's like cutting your leg off, then no one knows where you are and you can't reach your radio. You're done for. You're cactus. Generally, if you're on a two-wheel motorbike, you can crawl out from underneath it. And you still have to wear all your safety gear. Our kids wear steel cap boots. They don't wear motorbike boots because they're not flexible and they're not comfortable enough to wear for long periods. Have to wear helmets when they're actually mustering. Walking behind the cattle is usually a little bit different because it's like maximum 5 kilometers an hour. And then there's the heat and everything to consider. But I think a lot of what happens with the side-by-sides is that people get lulled into a false sense of security, because you've got one, haven't you? And you take your kids in it and you're not in any danger of tipping it over.
No. But I have seen other people drive them. So for me, when I first came on farm, two-wheel motorbike, and would 100% recommend that to anyone. I just had I think it was an Ag 200. Perfect while it was me and my first child mustering. But then we also have the stud. So I also need to have the capability of being able to carry feed and other things on the back of the quad with me for that. So that works really well when we're doing small mobs. But once I got to 2 kids and I had one on front and one on the back, I then swapped to a quad bike. Perfect setup for me and the 2 kids. They were both strapped to me, so they're not loose. They're not free. They can't do their own thing. They're both in packs. Not going fast enough to really have too many issues with it, but accidents happen. And there was too many close calls for me with my kids on the bike with me, even though they're strapped to me, too many close calls. So then that was one of those things we previously talked about, boundaries. And I was like, no, that's it. I'm not doing any more work with the kids on the bike. Too many close calls. And so then we upgraded to the side-by-side. The side-by-side for me is just the bench seat but I can have 2 car seats and me in the side by side. So the kids are strapped in, they're not loose. It is very unlikely for me to have more than like the 2 in the car seats and the newborn strapped to me. It's very unlikely that I usually have the 4th with me. He's school age now. He's either usually at school, or he would be on his own bike, or he would be on a different setup with dad. So we share the 4 kids around. Usually it's me and 3 kids, 1 strapped to me and 2 in their seats. So very safe setup. With that goes the change in the working practices. So I'm not trying to get in and out of the creeks or in and out of the gullies. There are paddocks that I can't go into because they are too rocky. But for a majority of the cropping paddocks, a majority of checking the cattle in probably 90% of the paddocks, it's perfectly fine to be in the side by side. Yes, I don't have the maneuverability to be able to do a lot of the shaping of the mob or heading them off in a certain direction when we are moving. But I can easily come up behind and keep pushing them. That's fine. So it's working with the mobs and what you're doing. It's working with the paddocks that you've got to make it realistic. Don't push them beyond their capability by trying to take them into rugged terrain that's too rugged for them. They are top heavy. And where I see a lot of issues is when people get a false sense of security about them, as you said, Gillian, when they're just going absolute flat bicky because they've got the confidence in them, they go really fast and they're not wearing the bloody seatbelt. It's like any other vehicle on the farm, whether it's your ute or whatever it is, if you're just poking along, well, it's probably fine. But if you're going flat bicky on doing something stupid, either 1, you shouldn't be doing it, or 2, at least have your seatbelt and your helmet on.
And this is the thing, like when I was an ambulance officer, I saw firsthand seatbelts save lives. 100%, I will stand by that, because there's been some accidents that I've attended where the people in them should have died. The car was just destroyed around them and they walked away with very minor injuries because they were wearing their seatbelts. And they also had good, solid, modern motor cars. And I think that's what people forget when they get in a side-by-side. They expect the same sort of protection that a motor vehicle cab will give. They're engineered slightly differently and they're not designed to withstand the same sort of torque and force. And so when you try to use a side-by-side like a car and you end up flipping it and rolling it, then it does have that ROPS cab and those sorts of things, but it's not the same. And that's where you do come unstuck, especially if you don't have a helmet on and your head goes out the window and strikes the ground. And, you know, if you don't have your seatbelt on, well, then you're just bouncing around and you're probably going to get thrown from the vehicle and or crushed underneath it, which is not a great way to end up. And I think we forget because we are, you know, we're so used to doing things a certain way. So we get in a different vehicle or on a different vehicle and it's like, looks like a car, it feels like a car, I'll drive it like a car, but it's not a car. And it's the same thing as when we got on a 4-wheeler. It's like, oh, well, this has got 4 wheels, it's very stable, and you push it beyond its limits, and that's how you end up tipping it over. And we just need to be more aware of the limits of these machines. And just because they say it's safer, like how many of us get on a 4-wheeler and it's got the safety sticker there on the front and it says, don't take passengers, don't let children under 16 years of age ride this, put your helmet on, you know, obey all these rules. And how many of us actually do that? I'd hazard a guess, very few, because we do it every day. We just get complacent and we pay zero attention to it. And eventually it'll catch up with us. And if it doesn't catch up with us, it'll catch up with our kids. And that's tragedies that we want to avoid. So, yeah, it's like the safety discussion we had the other week. It's just, you don't have to stop doing what you do, but just find a safer way to do it. And just bear in mind that the consequences of tipping this thing over could possibly be death. So just, you know, just throttle it back a little bit. It's not the same as you can't. And I've seen this with guys they bought big scrambler, like their type of 4-wheeler, like their racing 4-wheeler. So they bought them to do mustering on, and I had some horrific accidents because they were riding them like a 2-wheel bike in amongst the scrub and everything. They'd flip it over and, you know, that's the end of it. So, yeah, just be aware that it's not the machine that you believe it is, and it's not as safe as you think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think other things is like when you're changing up bikes or you're changing up different styles of machinery that you're using on farm, you need to be thinking about what differences there are and what else you might need to be taking with you as well. So like when it was just the two-wheeler, like I just have my backpack for me or for me and the kid, whoever I had with me. But then, okay, you go up to the four-wheeler or you go up to the ATV, like as you go up with those, you're increasing your fire risk as well, particularly in summer. If you don't have like your proper bash blade on or you haven't got any screening on the front, you're going to build up like grass seed and stuff quite quickly as well in areas that you wouldn't usually think about. For your other setup with the two-wheel bike. So when you're talking about those setups, like, okay, so fire is going to be a greater risk. So like the work utes, you're going to have like a fire extinguisher. And then that means you've got to check your fire extinguishers used by date. You've got to secure it properly. Okay, fire's now a thing, and I've got the kids in the car in the side by side with me. I've got me in the side by side, so I'm going to need to make sure I pack lots of water, not just for hydration, but for if it does catch a light and I use the fire extinguisher, and then I've got to use the water. But then I also want to pack a knife. The knife's got to be easily and accessible. So if I've got to cut the seatbelts, then I can, and I can reach that from wherever I am, whether you have an accident or whether it's on like caught on fire. You want to have something where you can cut the seatbelts really quick if they're not unlocking.
Yeah. And my dad's got a side by side. It's a diesel 3-cylinder something, and it does not go very fast at all. And he just uses it for poking around the sheep and feeding the sheep a handful of nuts and stuff like that. And because it was too hard for mum to get up in and out of dad's Toyota, so this is nice and low, and it's got no center console and stuff. So that's all cool. But my personal opinions, I would never own one, because for the same price you can get yourself a good second-hand tray back with air conditioning and windows and
a windshield.
And it's like, I know they're really popular with a lot of people, but if you know what you're doing, sort of thing, and you can take even a two-wheel drive ute anywhere, you can take one of those side by sides. Like, you just need to pay a bit more attention to where your tires are. Like, I would much rather be sitting in cool air conditioning or not in the rain or not in the freezing cold than sitting in something that's cost me 40 grand and has no goddamn windows.
Yes. I think there's a further discussion that we might have on this down the track as well. And that is the fact that there are work vehicles and setups that we need to have as farmers that are sold to industry for industry purposes, but are not necessarily thought through in, okay, a majority of farmers in Australia are family farmers, so how do we need to kit these out, and more rebates. So you can get a rebate on safety helmets, you can get a rebate on a side-by-side, but again, you're spending around 40 grand on a side-by-side and your rebate's $1,000. Like, yes, it's better than nothing, but still, if it's a work vehicle and you're using it every day and the rebates for farming purposes, then maybe there's a discrepancy there, and it'd be nice to have something else that could make sure that people are actually being safer on farms. Same as the roll bars, you can get a rebate on the roll bars, whether it's the little pokey doobie stick. I prefer the New Zealand made Half Moon than the stick, but the sticks are cheaper, so that's why you see a lot more of them around. They're better than nothing. They've got a rebate on them, but I still think there's so much more that we can do around the safety of our vehicles on farm to make sure that people are being safer, to make sure people are implementing this into their family farming businesses. And we know Alex, she was at AgFab a couple of weeks back from planter seed to safety. So Alex, I'm sure you've got lots of other suggestions. And as she says, keep it simple.
The simpler it is, the easier it is to be safe, because we've got to stop killing ourselves, to be honest. Like,
there's not enough for us to keep going.
Don't keep killing ourselves, realistically. Like, just, take a long, hard look at how you get around and just calm down a bit. Like, there's nothing that's worth your life or your children's life or your employees' life. Even if the cows get out onto the road, it's still not worth your life. You'll get them back. Just it'll take you a little bit longer, that's all.
100%. I agree with that, definitely. So, Gillian, that takes us to the mid of our episode. And this part of the episode is sponsored by Farm Table.
So thank you, Farm Table. Farm Table now hosts our podcast page, our landing page. So I will add that in the show notes below for you all to check out. But welcome to Farm Table. Farm Table is a proud independent Australian agricultural knowledge platform, bringing together the most relevant and curated agricultural resources from around the globe. More than that, Farm Table supports industry collaboration, peer-to-peer networking, and functions to build the capacity of individuals and organisations across the entire Australian ag supply chain. With over 3,000 resources, the latest agricultural events, funding opportunities, grants, micro courses and workshops, all in one location, Farm Table makes it easier to find the information you need.
So the first comment that I got through this week was merch idea. Gillian keeps quoting, "If you fail to participate, you forfeit your right to complain." Should this be on a shirt or jumper?
Oh, we'll put that on a t-shirt for sure. Definitely. And a bumper sticker, I reckon. A bumper sticker and a t-shirt. Because I think I have found a good supplier where we can set up a shop that we don't have to actually physically do anything. You just order it off them and it will come from them. So it doesn't have to come to me via the mail plane and then go back to you via the mail plane and could get lost somewhere, because none of us need that drama. So fingers crossed, I've finally found a good supplier that will be able to meet our needs and be able to actually sell you stuff, hopefully.
Print on demand. That's exciting.
Yep.
Okie dokie. So, Gillian, I was perusing your socials this week, as I quite often do. But my favourite article to see you quoted in this week was one that was with the Stock Journal. I'm going to link it in the show notes. And you likened succession plans to sex. So please explain.
That came from when I was over in Western Australia, actually, and I spoke to the West Australian Lot Feeders Association about succession planning, and it's like sex, religion and politics. We don't talk about it, and we should. And I'm not suggesting that you talk to your parents about sex or you talk to your children about sex in a creepy manner, because, you know, don't do that. That's weird. But it's it's a taboo subject, and I think that's one of the big reasons why it gets swept under the rug and ignored, and it becomes so challenging and hard for people to deal with. It's like we have the same sort of hang-ups around death and birth and those sorts of things. Like, we don't talk about our experiences and about just our goals and our desires around these things enough to normalize it. And so it's always going to feel icky and be uncomfortable when we start discussing it. And with those people who are experiencing circumstances where they may be subject to some sort of abuse flourishes in the dark unless we get out there and talk about these things. And how many kids have said to their friends and said, "Doesn't your special person get in the bathtub with you too?" And they've gone, "No, man, that's not normal." Like, it's these sorts of conversations we need to have, like, because I'll guarantee everyone, you're not alone in whatever scenario you are in. You're not alone. And I think it's really isolating, and it's crushing us as an industry to feel that isolation. And even if you're the older generation and you're wanting to, do succession planning, talk about it with your peers and ask your friends and your, age group how they've managed it, how they've done it, because everyone's having the same sort of complex discussions. Well, they should be having these discussions. And if you're not, and if your mates aren't, then maybe that's a bit of a wake-up call. But yeah, we do need to be more transparent about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone who wants to have a bit more of a read for that, that'll be linked in the show notes this week. The next comment, I think this was an email. Katja and Gillian, big fan of the podcast, as well as the Ultimate Farm Wife, and looking forward to Gillian's Succession podcast launch. Lately on Absolutely Fabulous, you've been talking a lot about Farmer Wants a Wife, and it sounds like some of the comments are a little bit contradictory when you're talking about the work you're doing boosting women in agriculture, but then a little bit negative and skeptical about the consistency of the contestants on the show joining the farm. Can you clear the air? So, Gillian and I are very much for women in agriculture. We think everyone should be part of the industry. We should welcome in everyone, no matter your background, your experience. You have something to bring to agriculture. And then on top of that, like with the Ultimate Farm Wife, the work I'm doing is to help people move to the land, because there is so much assumed knowledge. There is so much that, again, is unspoken about when you move to a farm or to a station that is so different to either life in the city or in a town, or even if you've come from a farm into another farm, it's still someone else's family farming business. So then the other part of that is then, okay, you're now integrating into a family farming business or back into a family farming business, which is a completely different dynamic, which is completely different to growing up on the farm. So these conversations need to be had. We are very much for having those conversations, so providing the tips, tricks, hacks, and advice. And then Gillian with her succession podcast, talking about, succession planning. What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't, what if it does fail? Well, does it matter if it fails? There's life after it, but it's a hard process. It's a hard slog. Probably no different to being a first-time farmer, only that you have the skills and you have the history. So very much pro women in agriculture. Where it conflicts with Farmer Wants a Wife is that the family farming businesses need to be set up for that exposure. They need to be set up for having someone come into the family farming business, whether they're coming through from the show or whether their son or daughter is bringing some home to the farm. That farm should be set up regardless of the scenario. But particularly when you're exposing your farm and your family to a show like that, the extra I's need to be dotted, their T's need to be crossed to make sure that it's beneficial for the people coming into that family farming business, as well as the family farming business, to make sure it's secure from corruption or from being exposed in such a public forum. Gillian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that when we talk about family farms, because it's not only a business, it's also their family home.
Mm-hmm.
And people rightly are very protective of that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from the perspective of when Farmer Wants a Wife, but anytime someone comes into that, it is like a business merger. It is like a partnership. You have to, make sure everything's correct, make sure everything's provided for, provisions are made for whatever circumstances. And that's not to say that those people aren't welcome, but let's just be extra careful to make sure that the home is protected and safe, and the business is protected and safe, and the individuals are protected and safe. So whatever that might look like, and that will look different for every different enterprise. And it's just, again, it's like that sex, religion, and politics conversation. You have to have it. And we have to grow a bit thick of a skin, and don't take it personally. It's not a personal sledge against people who are coming into family farms and those sorts of things, because we cop this a lot as daughter-in-laws about how we're going to steal the farm and divorce and take the rug out from everyone. And a lot of daughter-in-laws cop that sort of talk. And it's to sort of stop that from happening before it even starts.
Mm-hmm. And that conversation and those types of things can go on no matter how long you've been in the family farm, whether you've been there not even 12 months to, I know people who have been in the family farming business nearly 30 years and they still get it. So they're conversations that are very prevalent in the agricultural industry.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Gillian, we had a couple of comments over on the socials. Did you have those with you?
Yeah, so one of our listeners would like to know about what we think about the election promises being made by the, Labor coalition and the Greens, because I don't think we've heard, the coalition's sort of the Nats as well, but the Nats and Liberals often have different ideas. So, the Weekly Times has quite handily put them all in an article. So I think we've heard some of the major ones. We've got the National Food and Food Security Council and Strategy. Both major parties are backing that. One that's really important probably for our listeners is the Universal Outdoor Mobile Obligation, because currently Telstra or whoever your phone provider is does not have to provide you with universal mobile access. It is just your landline. So that would be a massive, massive win. The energy bill relief, what a waste of time, energy and money. The 20 million to support Australian producers through a Buy Australian campaign, which was announced in the budget. I wish someone would give me a $20 million advertising budget, because holy shit, well, couldn't we do some massive things for agriculture with that? Beef Australia is a big winner. If Labor gets back in, they're going to give them not going to give them, but there's going to be $23.8 million to sponsor agricultural trade events, the bulk of which will be going to Beef Australia. And don't get me wrong, Beef Week is a great event, but I'm not sure that's the best way to boost agriculture. Rex Airlines, obviously that's a really good investment if you live regional and Rex is your only flight, like I am. Like my nearest airport's Coober Pedy. Rex is the only plane that comes there, and I really don't want them to go down the toilet. We've got roads, we've got all that sort of things. Coalition's promised an instant asset write-off up to 30 grand, and they want to enshrine it in legislation, which sounds good in theory, but in practice, enshrining anything in legislation is a nightmare, because then it's a nightmare to change. So I probably wouldn't go down that road if it were me. They're going to repeal the live sheep export phase out, scrap the Scope 3 emissions reportings, which would probably be really beneficial, actually, because it's just an added burden that producers don't need. They're going to cut public service jobs. I don't know how that's going to play out, to be honest. Bring back the agricultural visa for temporary workers. I'm not sure that the way that they're proposing it is actually the best way to address the lack of agricultural workers in Australia. Like, obviously, temporary visa holders like backpackers, etc., they do a lot of the heavy lifting, especially when it comes to fruit picking and that sort of thing. But I'm sure there's an easier, quicker way to do it. They're going to do an import container levy to lock in biosecurity funding, which is something that's been on the table, off the table, on the table, off the table for about 10 years. Stopping plan changes to superannuation where assets over $3 million are taxed, because that's a big deal, especially when you're talking about handing over the family farm, because they want it on unrealised capital gains, which is a nightmare. No more water purchases in the Murray-Darling Basin. That's not going to make a lot of people very happy. And repeal critical minerals legislation. Again, sounds good in theory, but do I really want them digging up my backyard and undervaluable farmland? I'm not very sure about that. The Greens, they want to spend $250 million on an R&D centre to drive sustainable farming, which I suggest would be a massive waste of money, because we're already sustainable. If we weren't, we would all have starved to death and be broke by now.
100%.
They want to end fossil fuel subsidies for all industries except agriculture, which one of those things sounds good in theory, but in practice, how hard is that going to be to implement? And the mining lobby's got a massive amount of pull, so I don't think that's going to. $100 million to advance the development of alternative proteins. I've got nothing against grain growers developing alternative proteins, but, you know.
What do they mean specifically by alternative proteins?
That's what
if they're going to be growing meat in a lab, I'm 100% against that.
Yeah,
if they
that's
want to put more research
too.
into, yeah.
If it's $100 million to, like, I don't know, to turn chickpeas into chickpea patties, you know, shelf stable, whatever, feed the world, that doesn't really faze me, because agriculture is still getting the benefit. But if it's alternative proteins in the sense that we're going to cook up some goo and serve that up, I'm not really keen on spending money on that. $80 million to protect Australia from invasive species. Not enough, to be honest. But then again, none of the other parties have even mentioned it. So $28 million over 4 years to strengthen environmental biosecurity, which, again, what is that? That's not enough money to do anything productive, and it just looks good for people in the cities. Subsidise on-farm batteries and renewable energy infrastructure with $50 million to lower costs and drive adoption. I think that's too little too late, because I'd like to suggest that if anyone's going to put in a RAPS unit like we've already done it. We already have our own system, and I will guarantee you it won't be to upgrade what we've already got. It'll be for new units only, and that's going to, like, what's even the point? $75 million for the beekeepers impacted by varroa mite. Yeah, I don't know much about varroa. $50 million for commercial seaweed aquaculture and harvesting. I'm a bit torn with this because, like, I'd rather just leave the sea alone. Like, we've got enough trouble trying to manage what we do on the land. Do we, like, want to, because, like, you look at what's happening in Tasmania with the salmon farms, that appears to be going quite poorly in some cases. Do we want to start mucking around in the ocean? And I don't know enough about it, to be honest.
I think when they're talking about bees, like if we start with bees, then that improves pollination, which improves feed rates and fruit rates and everything else. So I can see where they're coming with from the bees. From the oceans and the seaweed, I assume they're looking at it as an alternative to normal fertilizers, and like a lot of people tend to do like seaweed sprays and stuff. They're doing a lot of research into seaweed, into adding it to troughs for livestock for different minerals and calmness and all sorts of things. So I'm wondering if it's going down that track.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, but it just seems like they've just plucked projects out of the air that appeal to their sort of green nature and don't actually support conventional agriculture, which, that's a very Greens thing to do and say. They are suggesting a $3 billion communications fund to support regional, rural and remote areas, and why the coalition a la the Nats haven't suggested that, I don't know. Because that would be a literal no-brainer. End native forest logging, again, that's an industry I don't know enough about to comment. I would like to suggest there's people who are employed in that wouldn't like that idea. One thing that's going to upset a lot of people in agriculture is end the live export trade industry entirely. Cattle and sheep. The Greens have put it out there. That's their goal.
I will put several beeps in that for exactly what we think of that, because I'm not even in the sheep industry. And then, yep, there they go. They've done it with the sheep. They're going to bring it nationwide.
Yep. End factory farming, which is interesting because what is factory farming? We don't have it. It's intensive agriculture or extensive agriculture. And they want to bring forward the ban on caged egg production to 2036, which, given where we currently are with avian influenza and chicken and egg shortages, I think they might struggle with that, because at the end of the day, the consumer demand for those products will probably always override any other considerations. So I see that the Greens started strong there, and they were like trying to bring everyone together, and then they were just like, oh, by the way, we're going to ban live egg. So we talked about last week, when you're giving your preferences away and you're voting for people, be very, very careful who you vote for and why, and what they actually intend to do if they end up in power, which is important if we're going to have a, what's it called? I can't even think, a minority government who has to make deals with the Greens and independents to get things over the line, because then a lot of horse trading and stuff will come in. A lot of these things that we think would possibly never happen suddenly are direct front and center policy positions. So yeah, just be really careful.
Live export also includes camels and other pest species which were originally brought to Australia. So with the camel trade, when you go over to places like Abu Dhabi or anywhere like that where they have camel experiences, there is a 99% chance you are riding an Australian camel that has been exported from our deserts. So once they cancel that, what are we going to do with the wild camel population? What are we going to do with the wild donkey population? What do they think is going to happen with things like that we are as a country benefiting from through live export? So live export is not just for meat consumption through the normal animals that you look at. Like that would also be exporting the horses. So there are many people who breed thoroughbreds, racing horses, show jumping horses that are all exported. So that should like put an end to that as well. So where is Australia going to get their wealth if we cannot trade animals
It'll be interesting to see, because in that article it doesn't go right into the nitty gritty of the policy positions, obviously, but live exporters that look crayfish, because they're alive.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff that goes on airplanes as well. Like
Yeah.
we send a lot of breeding stock, high value breeding stock out on airplanes and those sorts of things. So there might be some people who think, oh, well, you know, live export's cruel, et cetera, ban it because it will make meat cheaper here in Australia. It will temporarily, because what will happen is, as we lived through in 2011 with the overnight ban of the live export industry for cattle, because we experienced this personally. Those cattle in the north had nowhere else to go, so they were sent to southern markets, which means our prices all crashed. So our budgets were shot to shit. Anything that we could expect, realistically to get $500 a head for, we were getting $200 a head for. And then we couldn't keep them here, obviously, because they had nothing to eat. So they had to be sold. So yes, there was a glut in the market. Prices went down temporarily, because what happens then is when you kill everything, it's gone forever. Yeah. And it'll still go overseas in a box. So that doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to see cheaper meat at the supermarket. It just means we make less money. We make less money. We go out of business. So next time you want to buy something, there's no one around to produce it anymore, because we all went broke the first time. That's why we need these stable export markets to be able to keep our numbers nationally up to a certain level to withstand things like floods, fires, droughts, because we're a big country and we can put wheels underneath things and move them around, but we need to be able to access markets to keep the breeding numbers up, to make it profitable and sustainable for us to stay in business.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, think very carefully before you give your votes away.
We love hearing everybody's comments. We love covering on the podcast what it is that you're interested in. So keep them coming, whether you're commenting on social posts over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. What else are we on? Is that what we're on?
I don't think anyone goes to Threads much, but yeah.
Or whether you want to add that via email. Our email address is also in the show notes and over on the YouTube channel. This is a great time to remind you all, if you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, to give us a 5-star review and make sure you are subscribed for future episodes. If you're over on the YouTube channel, also subscribe and leave a comment on your favorite video as we go along. We'd love to hear what you think. Heading into topic 2. We are looking for a topic 2 sponsor. So if you'd like to sponsor us, please get in contact either with Gillian over on the socials or myself over on the email or the YouTube channel. So we thought topic 2, we would have a bit of fun. And topic 2, the hobby farmer debate. Gillian's going to take the against, I'm going to take the affirmative, and we're going to have the greatest hobby farmer showdown. Now, this topic was provoked because Gillian and I follow a couple of hobby farmer pages over on Facebook, and sometimes we see the most peculiar things going on and being asked for. As some colourful language actually used this week in a few posts. So let's get started. Gillian, do you want to start us off?
I'd just like to say that there are some hobby farmers out there that are making everyone else look really bad. And this sounds really like it's a good fun topic and everything, but as an industry representative, and we have the threat of LSD and FMD on our doorstep, it frightens the absolute living shit out of me that there are people out there with livestock who don't believe in science.
Gillian, for those who are from our urban backgrounds and may not have too much to do with livestock, can you please break down LSD and FMD?
So lumpy skin disease and foot and mouth disease are two diseases that are very prevalent in Asia and other countries around the world. And as you know, Asia's just our northern, neighbour up there. There's these sorts of things. They don't necessarily, I think FMD does, but LSD, lumpy skin disease, is transmittable via insect. So it doesn't need to have animal to animal transition. It is it's not fatal, but it is a really big animal welfare issue, especially when you think about the size of our herds and how remote a lot of them are. And it cuts down milk production, so then you're losing calves, and then they're because it's lumpy skin disease, they become really unsightly, they itch and they scratch, and then they knock holes themselves, they get secondary infections, and then they're not fit to be eaten because they're all so we're trying our level best to keep these diseases out of the country. And what's kicked this debate off is that there were some people in the hobby farmers page looking for, and it's the language that offends me. They were looking for a ram that hasn't been jabbed. And because somehow vaccinating your animals and then him covering his other animals, he's going to spread his vaccination around, which is literally, some vaccinations are passed from mother to progeny in the womb and through the milk. That's how they're supposed to work. That's how little creatures, even little humans, have their immunity. But honest to God, if you can't understand the most basic elements of animal husbandry and science, you have no business owning animals. It beggars belief, because these people are also walking animal welfare nightmares, not just animal biosecurity nightmares, because they don't treat their animals appropriately when they get sick. And they're the ones who get on the front page of the news, and then all farmers apparently really mean to their animals. It's like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, mm-hmm. Go homestead and Katja.
So my counter argument to that is that I spoke to some vets in town, and hobby farmers keep them in business. Because they like to go to their local vet and their local LLS service or their local community groups to ask for advice and to seek treatment for some of their animals. But yes, usually if people are introducing themselves to farming for the first time, if they're wanting to start on a smaller hobby block and work up from there, a lot of the time they're starting with not a lot of knowledge of the industry. They're not doing a lot of research. So they do lean heavily on their veterinarians. And many vets, particularly in our area, do say that's who they make their money off, not from their farming communities or their farming contracts, although the vet fees are getting ridiculously expensive in this area because they can charge that because of the level of the work that they have. The further out west or further remote you get, Gillian, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they level out a little bit.
I don't know. We don't have vets come here. We're the vet, and we won't let an animal suffer any longer than it has to.
Yep.
So, and that's the reality for a lot of people. And that's, you have livestock, you have dead stock.
Mm-hmm.
And even our kids acknowledge that. And I think, to back up your point, Katja, if they're a hobby farmer and they are going to a vet, obviously they have in their mind animal welfare is at the front of their mind, scientifically proven treatments are at the front of their mind. My issue lies with hobby farmers who should have a tinfoil hat on their head. They probably do, because there's all this off the grid, hiding from the government, sovereign citizen, don't come in contact with modern society, and they're getting their information off other nutters. And they're the same sort of people that tell you to do outrageous things for cancer. They're the same sort of people that, and realistically, they are a problem. Yeah. And the fact that they will not, and this is my issue, is that they believe that they are right and justified, because for some reason, anyone who believes that vaccinating your livestock for certain things is a good thing, and that treating your animals with antibiotics is a good thing. We've all been paid off by big pharma. Big companies are telling people to buy all these things unnecessarily. Farmers don't buy shit if it's not necessary, because it is expensive. And I can say this quite, where we live, because of where we live, we don't have a great need for vaccinating things. We don't do a lot of vaccinations. We might vaccinate for botulism occasionally, and that's it. So, yeah, we fit right into that semi-organic bloody production system using no chemicals, whatever, which is a nonsense too, because everything's a chemical, but whatever. It drives me mad. Like, I would like to just just raid their property and take all their animals away and say, you are not allowed to have animals because you're obviously not fit. And let's have a check of your kids while we're going, because I've got concerns. Like,
Gillian, you sound a little bit like another group just then. I think if you're going into this space, it's like anything else. I tend to collect animals. I tend to collect fruit trees and other things as well, because I like to collect things like that. I'm very curious by nature and I love to learn. But if you are heading into a hobby farm, if you are collecting animals, you need to do your research. You need to do your research not from nutters on the internet, but from respectable sites about looking after those animals, caring for those animals. You can start with the real basics: shelter, water, feed, and clean living quarters. That sounds really simple. That's 4 things to start with. Add in your biosecurity on top. That's 5 things you need to be doing. And if you're not doing those for your animals, if you're not doing the research, then you need to find another home for them.
yeah. And if you are in a hobby farming district and you share a boundary with a commercial producer, there is no faster way to get yourself in serious amounts of trouble than if you have lice or worms or foot rot or any other myriad of communicable diseases that livestock can spread around, than by not treating them. Because you will be in major strife. If you infect a commercial herd, then the government will knock on your door. I'll guarantee it.
Yeah.
Biosecurity is everyone's business. Even if, like, avian influenza is a perfect example. Even if you've only got a handful of birds in your backyard, you need to keep a really close eye on them, because that's how these things spread, is from little farm to little farm to little farm until they end up at a big farm. And wild birds can carry these sorts of things, and foxes and cats and stray dogs carry them from paddock to paddock as well. It's kangaroos carry botulism. It's all these sorts of things. You need to be really aware of it. You can live a low input life if you choose to, but you need to have welfare and biosecurity at the forefront of your mind. How you choose to do that in line with best practice management. Don't start randomly feeding things to animals if there's no need for it, like unproven treatments. Oh, I'm going to feed my cat a vegan diet. Don't do that. That's cruel. And these things exist for a reason, because we've proven it over many, many years. A lot of the things that we use to feed animals for their welfare and health haven't changed for hundreds of years. So it's, you can do it, but you need to be aware of how much strife you can get yourself into and how much damage you can do to other people's livelihoods by not following the rules.
Yeah. Hobby farms are great because it gives you a sense of connection to nature. You need to take responsibility with that. A connection with nature also can improve your mental health. In a lot of other countries, not Australia, not the US, but in a lot of other countries, when you are unwell, either mentally or physically, the doctors and the traditional medicine people will tell you to get out into nature, to go for a walk, to take your shoes off and walk through the grass, if there's no birds. But
that's probably what I don't describe it in Australia.
Connecting with your surroundings, connecting to the bird song, the animal life, feeling the breeze on your face is all really good for your mental and physical health. So hobby blocks are absolutely fantastic for this, particularly if you're wanting to increase that exposure. It's fantastic if you're curiously minded and you want to learn more about the land, if you want to learn more about animals, if you want to learn more about food production and you want to have a go at doing it yourself. Hobby blocks are fantastic for this. If you are a first generation farmer, or you are what was one of the terms we came up with in a previous episode? If you're a self-funded farmer and you've gone out on your own, Hobby Block is a fantastic place to start because you can set up an agricultural business on not much land that can then start earning you an income to get a primary producer's license of your own, an ABN of your own, and start churning out, whether you're wanting to do egg production or herbs or something like that. You don't need a huge block to be able to go into production like that. So it's a really great testing block to learn and hone your skills before you move into a bigger business.
Yeah. And if you are on a hobby block and you do live in amongst commercial farms, you make sure your fences are secure and your dogs can't get out, because you won't have dogs left if they start chasing other people's stock. And that's probably one of the biggest complaints that I hear around the traps from people who live amongst hobby farming blocks, is that dogs wander and they chase stock and they harass, especially sheep. And yeah, it's a really big problem in the UK, actually, with people walking their dogs not on the lead. So you need to be a responsible animal owner, because you owe it to those animals. And a lot of things that I see firsthand when I go down south amongst the hobby blocks is people aren't feeding their stock properly. Yeah. If you cannot feed them, you need to get rid of them. And yes, that might be very sad to send them to the abattoir or to sell them to someone else who may then fatten them and sell them to the abattoir or eat them. But you cannot watch them starve. That's not good for you, and it's not good for your animals.
If you are going onto a hobby block, you also need to be very mindful about your stocking rates. So stocking rates is something that many of us have learnt on hands experience doing. There are courses where you can learn about stocking rates as well. But if you are looking at your paddock and you can see the dirt, this is probably different for Gillian's country, but for down here, if you can see the dirt, you've overgrazed. If you can't see organic matter, you've overgrazed well and truly. So there's different parts where you can come up with, measuring per square meter, you can measure plant height, all those sorts of things. If your plants are not coming up to age, to maturity and seeding and dropping seed, you are well and truly on your way to devastating your land. It will not regenerate with the rains if it's not seeding. So you need to have your stocking rate well and truly looked after. If you have animals such as horses or sheep or goats, they're going to eat down further than other animals such as cattle. So stock appropriately depending on what animal you have. If you have animals such as pigs that like to furrow and dig things up, then you need to keep them in a particular area for a majority of the time and then let them out. These are breeding pigs, not wild pigs, Gillian. I saw that face. But there's different management. You can still have free range animals, but you need to be able to land manage correctly and get curious. Lots on YouTube about this, lots on your different DPI websites. You can learn this. Get curious, start your research.
Of reputable sources. And I'd like to suggest other people in the Hobby Farming Australia Facebook page are not reputable sources. I think I've been shadow banned because I'm not allowed to post anything in there now. So
Gillian, were you getting too real with people?
No, I was saying that, well, one of the moderators had the belief that someone who has many, many years, decades actually, of animal husbandry experience and farm management, their opinion was just a opinion, not actually like other people are allowed to have opinions. And I said, you can, but you're wrong. So because you believe something doesn't make it right. So now I'm in trouble with the hobby farmers, which it's not the end of the world, because it does not do my mental health very good to be on that page very frequently. But I also cannot walk past people with their shenanigans that have the potential to really badly damage broad-scale agriculture, which is what they could possibly do. So yeah, you want to be a hobby farmer, be a responsible hobby farmer, or you'll find yourself run out of town really quickly.
Hobby farms are an incredible lifestyle. They are great if you want to double your toes in the industry and you are responsible it's a really great lifestyle because you don't have to work hard, long hours in the sun. Like you can just be, I mean, sometimes a hobby farmer is referred to as a lifestyle block or a weekend farmer, because, you know, most of the time when you're on a hobby block, you cannot earn a full wage and income off it. Usually you have a secondary income. So it's perfect for if you just want to double your toes in it, you want to be responsible, you want to learn more, but it's also great because you can get off-farm income. You don't have to spend all your time on the farm block. Hobby farmers tend to do a lot within some land care groups as well. So they do apply for a lot of funding that is put out into the agricultural industry. So sometimes you will see a debate with, oh, well, those lifestyle blocks are using up those resources that are for other agricultural products that are going to help the greater community. But they've also got a right to those funds. And if they're using those funds appropriately, it can benefit their neighbours if they are rejuvenating their riverbanks and their creek banks so that there is less silt in the system. Those types of projects, again, fencing comes a lot through land care. Putting in trees and shrubs, that's great. If you're into locking up your land and doing nothing with it, then a lifestyle and hobby block probably isn't for you. Because remember, when we've spoken about locking land up, you've still got to do it responsibly. You still need to look after pest management. There is no point locking up a block for your carbon credits or for rejuvenating land if you're not going to do anything about pest control. And pest control doesn't have to be negative. If you don't want to do it yourself, get someone else in to do it. There are people who are licensed. It is their job to do that. But you're also not going to rejuvenate a land if it is overrun with rabbits, if it is overrun with foxes, pigs, kangaroos. You need to look at a safe system and a safe system to take care of that for you. So get someone in if you don't want to do it yourself, if you don't have time to do it yourself, or if you don't have the resources to do it yourself. Because a lot of the time when we've got a hobby block, when you've got a lifestyle block, you might not have all the machinery to do projects yourself. You will have to get someone in, which comes with a higher cost than doing it yourself. But it's well worth it. Again, get curious, meet people, put it down to a networking opportunity, get involved with your community. It's a fantastic lifestyle.
Be a good neighbour. Yeah. Because if you make yourself a good neighbour, then you will find the farming community around you will be happy to help you.
100%.
Because we are generally friendly, helpful people, unless you're doing the wrong thing. That's when we start to really get upset. So if you have a hobby block and none of the commercial farmers around you like you, maybe take a long, hard look at what you're doing.
And Gillian, you mentioned dogs earlier. I want to double tap on that. If you cannot see your dog, it doesn't matter how well behaved you think your dog is. Dog's natural instinct is to hunt. If you cannot see your dog, you need to assume that it's up to no good. Doesn't matter how good you've trained it. Doesn't matter how good it is in your eyesight. You need to take that idea of what a dog can be and implement that when you move onto a lifestyle block or a hobby farm, because they're naturally going to want to hunt.
Yeah.
So
if your dog
if
your dog doesn't have excellent recall, the dog can't live on the hobby block or be off the lead. It has to be on the lead. If it doesn't have excellent recall, it can't live there off the lead.
That was my next point. My next point was going to be, it is not horrible to have your dog on a lead. It is probably more horrible to have your dog in a run. That's probably a topic that can be quite heated as well. But if you've got a dog in a run that is not let out to work or to do discipline with, then a run can drive animals crazy and can actually make them a little bit stupid. But having them on a chain and having them under a strict exercise regime or letting them off to actually do work and endurance and discipline is going to do your animals much better than having them off all the time. And it's also going to do you a favor mentally, because you're not always having to think, where is my dog? I haven't seen it for 10 minutes. Is it up to no good? Because it doesn't take very long for them to get across to the neighbors and back. And you don't want to be having that discussion with your neighbors about whether you're going to pay for the livestock or whether you're going to put down the animal or they are.
Or whether the neighbour's already shot your dog and hung it on your fence. That's another possibility. That does happen. Or has your dog gone onto the neighbours and taken a bait and then comes back and dies in your lounge room? That's another possibility.
Yeah. If you are on a hobby and lifestyle block, you need to make sure that when you're bringing on chemicals, whether it's dog baiting, snail bait, whatever it is, that it's also locked up appropriately. Anything that you should be doing for young children, you should be doing for your pets as well. So keep everything up and off the ground and in locked cabinets.
It's common sense. It's part of being safe. And, don't get complacent with ag chemicals. And if you're one of those people who don't use ag chemicals and you want to use weird stuff like copper sulfate, just remember that shit can poison you too. So
use gloves, use your safety equipment, you mix it according to the instructions, and get your chemical card. I think that's one of the best things that you can get. Start with as a hobby farmer is get your chemical certificate, start really getting curious and actually getting your accreditations. Rural Biz does an incredible job at teaching those small courses. They are available online. And I'm giving them a free shout out because they have put together a package where they're offering some of their courses for free to a lucky door winner at the conference.
Oh, excellent. Very excellent.
I think the last thing I want to say for this debate is that hobby blocks can really inspire future generations to engage in agriculture and promote the interest of farming and environmental stewardship if it is done correctly.
It can. I don't see a lot of it being done correctly. Luckily for me, there's no hobby blocks where I live, but down around where mum and dad are, there's starting to be increasing number of hobby blocks. But just be a good neighbour, do what you want, but just remember that you can't impact other people and their livelihoods to be like that's at the end of the day, and animal welfare has to come first.
Our aim was not to offend too much with this final topic and debate. What we wanted to do was breed curiosity and make sure that if you are, because one of the things we're trying to do on this podcast is to really close the gap between urban and rural. If you are wanting to step into that space, if you're wanting to learn more, get curious, do it correctly, and make sure that your impact on the agricultural community is a positive one, because we want you here. We think you can bring so much to the farming industry, but you need to make sure that you're going to do that responsibly.
Yeah, you've nailed it. We encourage everyone to participate, but there's these structures and frameworks and rules and regulations, and they exist for a reason. And it's not because we're in the pay of the big pharmaceutical companies or we're beholden to elders or Nutrien to sell ag chemicals or anything like that. It's because it keeps everyone and our animals and our livelihoods safe. And if you don't respect that, then it's really likely that you're going to have a very bad time moving to a hobby block.
Mm-hmm. Guys, if you have any suggestions of articles, research papers, or even just reels and memes, please send them our way. We'd love to discuss them. We love sharing our opinion with you, and we love it when you share your opinion with us. Anything else you want to deep dive on? Yeah, send it our way, guys. Remember, if you're listening on a podcast platform, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps us to be found and shared amongst other like-minded people who would also love to listen. Until next time, guys, thank you very much, and we'll see you in another one.
Bye.